It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. It's season 6. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd like, share, and comment. This week, I'm joined by returning guest Elizabeth Engel and first-time guest Shelly Alcorn, and they're here to talk about their new paper on climate change and associations. And our topic for January 8th, 2024 is The Time Is Now, Associations and Climate Change. Welcome to episode 223. Hey everybody, Happy New Year. It's 2024 and it's Monday, January 8th. That means it's time for the first episode of the year of Radio Free 501c. Thanks for joining us again as we kick off our 6th season. We are here with returning guest Elizabeth Engel and first-time guest Shelly Alcorn, and they're here to talk about their most recent white paper. And I guess I should remember to introduce myself for all of those new listeners out there. I'm Cecilia Sepp. I am the host, and I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting. Thanks for joining us. To our global audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. This topic is of interest to everyone on this planet. Why is that? Because it's about climate change. It's real, it's happening, and it's a constant. But we are in a crisis period with our climate right now. And Elizabeth and Shelly have taken the time to do deep research into this topic, what it means, the history of it, some of the science of it, and then case studies about how associations have been managing it. Because the paper is called The Time Is Now, Association Resilience and Adaptation. And the time is now for me to ask my guests to say hello and introduce themselves. Let's start with Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks for having us today, Cecilia. And it's great to be back on the podcast. My name's Elizabeth Engel. I'm the chief strategist of Spark Consulting, where I provide membership strategy consulting for associations. And I've been in the association industry forever, actual time, since the mid 90s, a number of years working directly for associations before I launched the business a little bit more than 10 years ago. Shelly?
Sure. My name is Shelly Alcorn. I'm the principal futurist with Michelle Alcorn and Associates, and I focus on speaking about social topics, including climate change, climate justice, social justice, and other big trends that are heading towards the association community and what we can do about it.
That's great. And welcome to you both again. I love that the approach to this paper is what associations can do. Because we can do a lot of things. And Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you. As we were prepping for this episode, you mentioned that there's a huge spectrum of activities from the individual to the UN. So could you talk a little bit about where associations might fall in that spectrum?
You bet. So, one of the things when Shelly and I decided to tackle this topic, one of the things that really struck us was a lot of the ways that climate change is framed in our narratives is about either sort of that very large, international, it's got to be addressed at the UN level and, the conference of parties that they have regularly. And, it's this kind of this big international thing that we've got to have all these formal agreements and all this kind of stuff, or it's framed as, your individual consumer choices, get an electric car and, install solar panels on your roof and, and all that stuff is great. You should definitely do that. But that leaves an enormous amount of space in the middle. And, the thing about responding to climate change, the thing about building resilience in the face of climate change, the thing about learning how to adapt the ways we work and live in the face of climate change, the majority of that work is going to take place in the middle there. It obviously the UN is important, individual choices are important, but that leaves an enormous space for multinational groups, NGOs, national governments, regional governments, state governments, local governments, other types of regional and local organizations, of which associations are one. And that's the world that Shelly and I operate in. And so we realized it was important to talk about, in this, it's going to take all of us situation, what's the piece that is for associations? What's the role that we can play in addressing this massive global crisis? Because the role that we can play is actually significant.
This, and I'm so glad you framed it that way because I agree. One of the things I talk to people about is that all nonprofits, no matter what type of nonprofit you are, you're focused on a specific thing, whether it's education, feeding the hungry, or helping a profession be better. And by doing that work, you're making that part of the world better. So imagine if in the area of climate change, we were all motivated to look at it from that approach. Where our 2 feet are, that's where we can start, and that's where we can make some improvements. So Shelly, what do you think about that? What your perspective on associations contributing?
Well, my perspective is I've always firmly believed that associations are vehicles for social change for the better, and that they have a latent power within them to overcome obstacles, whether legislative or social or whatever, to actually move the conversation forward. There is a role for activism, there is a role for all of these other types of approaches, but really we wanted to approach it from the association perspective as it's a matter of economics as well. This is a business imperative as well as a moral imperative. And it is, although climate change is often framed in a political context as to who supports the science, who doesn't support the science, who believes it's happening, who doesn't believe it's happening, all of those things. Climate change is apolitical. This is not a political issue. This is a scientific issue. And so therefore, associations are a great vehicle to sort of transcend those artificial barriers that we put up and actually engage in collective action that's designed to help strengthen our members, to make them more resilient, to make them more adaptable, and to build the kind of communities that we always talk about, that we want to build, but build them for another reason, which is protecting your members' lives as well as protecting their livelihoods. And so that's sort of the way I think about associations in this arena, and sort of what compelling reasons they have to act.
Well, and I do want to piggyback on something that Shelly remarked on the economic piece of this. Mm-hmm. One of the ways we organized the information in the white paper was around economic impacts. And, as we see it, climate change is going to have economic impacts in sort of 3 realms of association activity. One is, we are small to medium to, in some cases, large businesses, and so it's going to impact our own internal operations. When we think about things like, our office space and, our investment policies and some of those other kinds of things that have to do with the ways that we operate internally. And in fact, one of our case studies addresses that. Then we also have the realm in which we're dealing with member-facing stuff, the programs, products, and services, the benefits that we provide to our members. And obviously, climate change is going to have a huge impact there. Our case study is literally the most obvious one, which everybody watching this has already thought of: your annual meeting and other types of events where you are gathering large numbers of people in a particular location that most of them have to travel to. But then the third piece of it, and Shelly alluded to this right at the end of her statement about, our members' lives and their livelihoods. Mm-hmm. A third piece of this is we represent professions and industries. And hopefully we also lead in those professions and industries. And in fact, climate change is going to be affecting various professions and industries, and it's going to have, as many things do, differential types of impacts. One of the examples that we mentioned briefly is, like, if you happen to be in an association that represents, alternative energy types of providers, it is a boom time for you, right? Climate change is bringing a lot of positive attention to your industry and providing a lot of opportunity for your industry to be part of the solution. Then as we look at other industries, healthcare is a good example, right? We're going to see diseases migrating. We're starting to see tropical diseases sort of heading north. Mm-hmm. There's going to be increasing zoonotic diseases, et cetera. That's going to have a huge impact on healthcare. And even just, a small example, about how healthcare providers are looking at this is there's a terrific, we have a quick link to it, effort that's been going on in anesthesiology, where anesthesiologists realized that, hey, there's a variety of ways that we can put people under. And one of the particular gases that we use, that's commonly used, has a much higher environmental impact as far as releasing greenhouse gases than many other options. Well, let's take a position on that and say, like, these other ways work well too. Let's stop using the one that has this much higher carbon footprint and use some of these greener alternatives.
Wow. Well, and there's individual action right there by
Exactly.
profession. We're just not going to recommend we do that anymore. And that kind of comes back to one of the things associations also can do well, which is industry standards.
You bet.
And codes of conduct, ethical commitments. I do, and also something Shelly said kind of jumped out at me. There's a business imperative and a moral imperative. Being the idealist that I still tend to be, though I sometimes feel like a skeptical cynic being from Missouri, I would like to think the moral imperative would come first for 501c organizations as opposed to the business imperative. But we all know no margin, no mission. We don't have a strong business model. We can't make these things happen. So, Shelly, I'm going to ask you kind of an off-the-wall question. A little bit.
I'm the perfect crazy, one for the off-the-wall questions.
But facts.
When you were, I did. Well, and as I mentioned, both of you as we were prepping, I was so impressed with how many citations there are in this research report. It's so well researched and so well cited. So, Shelly, what I wanted to ask is, did you find anything that really surprised you? You said you work on this topic already. Was there something that kind of got your attention that made you go, oh?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we get into topics and we learn and learn and learn about them, and we learn about the impacts, and we can get overwhelmed with the consequences of inaction. And I think what surprised me the most was really sitting down and thinking about practical things associations can do and ways they can start actually making those changes. It's you take it in, be overwhelmed by it if you need to be, but then turn around and turn that into something positive. So what I think is interesting is there are a number of associations who get this, but they're not talking to each other. They're sort of siloed, right? And there's interesting things going on. Elizabeth, I'll ask you when I'm done to talk a little bit about the Prometheus retreat that you went to a few months ago and sort of how that climate conversation evolved. But I think that what's missing is associations collaborating on the horizontal versus collaborating on the vertical. And I think that if we're able to break that issue, provide sort of a level playing field for people to come in and exchange ideas, I think the possibility of action by following models and case studies and ideas will actually generate some positive momentum in the direction that we need to go. So I think that's the thing that surprised me the most, was just this sheer amount of things that we can do. It's just a matter of finding the will to do it.
And coordinating.
Yeah.
Well, and in fact, that's one of our superpowers as associations. I had spent time earlier in my career working briefly at a company that did more work in kind of the cause-oriented fundraising space. And one of the things that shocked them about associations is how much collaboration there is between associations and how much information we're willing to share with each other. Well, of course, right? Because the Nurses Association and the CPAs Association are not competing. So, of course, if the Nurses Association finds something that works, they're happy to share that information with the CPA Association, unlike in the fundraising space where there's kind of this perspective that, like, there's a certain pie and we each get a slice of it. And if your slice gets bigger, mine's going to get smaller, right? And so, one of the things that we can do as associations that really can accelerate this kind of work is to talk to each other. And share share the good stuff that's going on and the cool things that we're trying and learning and doing, and use that to boost the work of the entire industry as a whole.
Hear, hear. Well said. But are you mad? What? Talk to each other? Well, it's so simple. It can't possibly work.
Right. Yeah. And to Shelley's point, a couple of months ago, the nice folks that put on the Prometheus retreat every year, it's usually in May, also do a monthly first Tuesday call where they just solicit topics from the people who are attending and create some breakout rooms, and everybody goes and has a chat. And so shortly after we had launched the white paper, I posed associations and climate change as a topic, and it got picked up. And so, I made sure to attend that first Tuesday meeting. And one of the things that was really interesting in the breakout room on the topic was, of course, there are case studies in the white paper, and then there's a whole section at the end of kind of additional positive stuff that's going on both inside and outside the association world, where like we didn't have the space or the time to collect all of those as full case studies for the white paper. But then, we're having this conversation in this room, and there was a woman in there who was an association exec from an association in the floral industry. And she was talking about one of the things that they're looking at is they have basically the entire vertical of the floral industry, all the way from the people who grow the flowers to the people who like sell and deliver the flowers. And she said, because they're able to look at that entire vertical, they realize there's an enormous amount of plastic that's used in the floral industry. So they've got this major initiative going on to reduce that. Another guy who was on there who was an association exec from an association for chain link fences. Chain link fences, right? And he's, one of the perceptions they've had trouble with in their industry is there's a perception that wood fences are more environmentally friendly than metal fences are, which is actually not true. And one of the things he had talked about is they've been working in their industry to get their entire supply chain LEED certified. And they haven't quite got the entire chain LEED certified, but they've got almost their entire supply chain LEED certified. And so now they're working on promoting that, and promoting that, in fact, metal fencing is actually very environmentally friendly. So again, there's these cool pockets of innovation that are happening. And we want to try to help our fellow association execs who are doing all that cool stuff find each other.
Well, and that's great. And I do, since you both brought it up, I do also want to give a shout out to the Prometheus First Tuesday events. They are picking up again this month in January.
Tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
Is it tomorrow? I thought it was this week. Oh.
Yeah, it'll be on the 9th.
Oh, yes, tomorrow.
For January, you bet.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Sorry. I still have vacation brain. I was out for like a week and a half the end of December. And I'm just like, what? No, that's right. I still have to register. So go to prometheusretreat.org. There's no fee to participate. And it's just a great group of senior level people. And you can suggest a topic or question you want to explore, as Elizabeth mentioned. And the Prometheus Retreat is the first week of May 2024 in Pennsylvania. And you can get information about that on the website as well, although registration is not yet open. But you can mark your calendar for that. It's a great way to bring people together, building what Elizabeth said, bringing people together to discuss how are we going to solve some problems and share this information that we already have. So, Shelly, what are some of your thoughts on, continuing to bring associations together in this area?
I think it's an incredibly important endeavor that needs sustained activity, because we're in a sustained emergency and we're not used to that. We're used to emergencies being an emergency and then it resolves and you learn your lessons and you go on. But actually, climate change is a sustained emergency and will be for the coming decades. Many climate scientists refer to 2023 as just a bonkers year. It was just outrageous. In the United States, from extreme weather events, we suffered $54 billion of losses through the end of Q3 2023. And that isn't taking into account Q4, which is the tornadoes and things that hit Tennessee. So as these things ratchet up, our attention is going to waver, because it's going to seem like, oh, we have to care about one more thing. We have to care about one more thing. To care about one more thing. It's like, yeah, so you do. So in terms of this conversation, it needs to be consistent with some recovery time, some mental health support, and understand that associations, this isn't something that your board can do in a year, even though we need to move quickly. This has to be sustained effort over time. And that as these things hit, if you have a conference and you have unfortunately picked the wrong city, for example, Acapulco, which got hit with Otis in 2023, which went from a tropical storm to a Cat 5 hurricane in 24 hours and slammed into a completely unprepared city. As you go through, as you run into these things, if you're hit, you're going to have to recuperate. You're going to have to think about how to be resilient. It's a marathon. And to me, that's what associations need to really grasp, is this is a marathon emergency. And it takes a sustained level of action while at the same time trying to protect yourself from feeling like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point about the oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, because that's where people can shut down and just maybe curl up in a ball and eat a pound and a half of chocolate, right? Because it's like, how am I going to, I am just one person. But, one person is who we all are. We are all one person. So by joining associations, which you mentioned in the paper, people connect because they want to work with other people to solve problems or answer questions. So one person, you can do what you can do. So for example, I think about these things a lot too. We are currently in a climate crisis, but my opinion is this: we cannot live in a constant state of emergency. We need to change the way we think about our planet. And we need to think about the way we live and how we do business. We cannot continue to deforest. We cannot continue to pave roads that hold heat and reflect it back up. We cannot continue to remove wildlife environments where animals live. This is why bears are digging in the garbage cans in suburban neighborhoods, and they don't hibernate anymore because there's constant food around. You've just stolen their home to build a plywood townhouse. Okay. You're just stealing their home. So where are they supposed to go? So don't get mad if you find a fox in your backyard. Okay. Just keep an eye on your pets. But that's the whole thing. Polar bears are migrating onto land because where they live is starting to go away. Things are disappearing. And some people may take the attitude that's a natural evolution of the planet. And it could be, but we might be speeding that up. Another thing to keep in mind that might make you a little stressed out is the magnetic poles of the planets are also slightly shifting ever so much every year, to the point where some scientists who study avian behavior are starting to predict that birds may not be able to migrate correctly anymore because they're going to get lost, because they have developed to follow a certain pattern. So we need to be aware of that. This is a living planet, and we cannot treat it like it's just a big rock. So I think your paper points this out so clearly, so well. But again, your paper ends on a very positive note. It sounds kind of dire, but it's not dire because we know it's happening. We know we can do something about it. So you did find some positivity and some joy at the end. So let's sort of back over to Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, you want to talk a little bit about that positivity that you did discover?
Yeah. So, a couple of things I want to mention related to that. One is, and certainly, neither Shelly nor I is Indigenous. So, we can't fully speak to that, but, one of the things that both of us found as a major source of inspiration in thinking about the white paper and in thinking about, how do we both share how serious this is, but not kind of spiral into doomerism, was, there's been a lot of work tying Indigenous wisdom to science lately. One of the sources we cite was Robin Wall Kimmerer with her book Braiding Sweetgrass. She is a trained scientist, but she's also Indigenous. And Shelly actually wrote quite a bit about this in the white paper about kind of some of the cognitive biases that prevent us from taking action. This represents a different way of viewing the world and thinking about the world and thinking about interrelationship. To some of the kinds of things you just highlighted, Cecilia, it can really help us make some progress in changing of our worldviews. the second thing I wanted to mention is one of the other sources that we cited was a woman named Rebecca Solnit, who is a historian and writer, and she just recently edited an anthology that the name of which is escaping me at the moment, but looking at this topic. And so, we had looked at some of her writings, and then I had an opportunity to participate in a webinar where she was speaking. And one of the things that folks tend to fear when we think about responding to climate change is that somehow, we're going to end up in this world of scarcity where we're kind of, pushed back into the dark ages, and we're in this, miserable subsistence way of living, and we have to give up all of our modern comforts, and, everybody ends up, miserable and unhappy, and, living in a hut somewhere. And, her point, or one of her points, is that when you ask people what creates a meaningful life, it's not stuff.
That's right.
It's meaningful work, it's meaningful relationships, it's being embedded in community. It's having a positive impact on the world around you. It's being in relationship to people and to nature, and all those sorts of things. It's not our things. And she poses, if we really think about what scarcity and abundance truly mean, the scarcity that we're living in is now. And the abundance, hopefully, is what's to come. If we can make that mental shift. And I think that's an incredibly empowering way to look at this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Yes, I remember seeing that in the paper when I was reading it. And, one of the things that I really think could help is how we raise foodstuffs. One of the benefits, and I know some people might say, "Oh, you're still wrong." One of the benefits of it being a little bit warmer is that we do have longer growing periods. That can be helpful. But as you mentioned, other things grow too. Different diseases are migrating. Things are moving. But I also we kind of talked about this 3D printing of meat or other foods is something that we're just now touching the surface of. So I think there is a positive future out there as well. I agree. So Shelly, what are your thoughts before we head into wrapping up this fascinating topic?
Well, I like to joke that I'm a bit of an apocalyptimist, when it comes to these sorts of topics. It's like, what are you compelled to look at? Climate change, totalitarianism, and artificial intelligence and nuclear proliferation. That's my jam for whatever unknown reason between me and my therapist. But the thing that I want to leave people with is none of us are getting out of here alive. Life itself is a terminal diagnosis, correct? And so science has given us some choices on some terminal diagnoses. And no matter what we do at this point, there are going to be consequences that are far beyond what we want to even contemplate. At the same time, then how shall we live? Do we live selfishly and just pull back and not take any action at all, even if it seems futile? Do we get up in the morning and feel gratitude for what we do have and then do our best to help other people with risk management and assessment and how they feel and things that they can do? It's looking at life and appreciating what there is, preserving what we can, and finding meaning in the things and the choices that we make as we decide what to do with our time. Mm-hmm. And if you're in an association and you work with manufacturing and you understand that we can't get the ships through the Panama Canal because of the drought that's happening, and there are these major economic impacts sort of on the way, you can find meaning in getting up and saying things that people might not want to hear and pushing people to get together to talk and to come up with ideas and come up with solutions to make the situation as good as it can possibly be, while realizing you have an ethical obligation to the planet and to the resources that we've taken indiscriminately, and what can we put back in a new era of balance, in a new era of meaning, and a new era of thinking about abundance differently. So, that's just the gift that we can give as an association community. And I think we're left aside, we're not thought of, people don't include us in conversations, and we've kind of had to shove our way into the COP process because nobody thought, well, what in the world could 65,000 organizations in the United States do? Well, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
If we decide to do it, we outspend the fossil fuels with our own lobbying capability. What happens if we turn our lobbyists loose on making policy changes that will actually benefit our members over the long term, not just over the short term? So, hey, you have a terminal diagnosis, fine. You still have to get up every day and figure out what you're going to do. And that's what I'm here to do.
That's great. Thank you. That is a wonderful thing for all of us to take forward. And before I ask you each for the thought you would like the audience to take away today, and then how they can get in touch with you, I just wanted to mention a book that's come back around to my consciousness, which is H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. And if you're not familiar with his work in the audience, he's a novelist, but also a well-known futurist. He imagined a lot of things that actually then came to be. The Shape of Things to Come is a book about how we almost destroyed ourselves, but then a group of people found another way and created that abundant future for everyone, where people got to live their lives. And it was a life of scholarly pursuits and scientific pursuits, and people being able to share their ideas freely with each other. So if you, Elizabeth mentions in the books, dystopian utopian novels that she's been reading lately, and that's a very dystopian utopian novel as well. So, well, as we're wrapping up this episode, gosh, I know we could probably talk about this paper another hour if we had the time. So I do encourage everybody to download this paper and read it. It's chock full of great information and ideas. So Elizabeth, let's go to you first. What is your one thought you'd like people to share? How can they find your paper that you and Shelly have written? And then how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to talk more?
Yeah. So I guess the one thought that I would want people to take away from this is one of the other driving factors in writing this white paper was that association execs, aside from a handful of lost causes, don't need to be persuaded that climate change is happening. We all know, but we can get in this place of I don't know where to start. And that was one of the things that Shelly and I were really trying to address with this is, we want to help you understand the science. We want to help you understand some of the psychological biases that prevent us or impede us from taking action. We want to kind of give you some of that theoretical context, but then we want to get down to brass tacks about what can you do, right? We're okay, I'm ready to go. What do I do? The white paper answers that for you and provides lots of different ideas around those three realms that we identified, your internal operations, your member-facing work, and then your professional industry. So pick it up, dig in, get started, pick one thing, demonstrate some success, and then move on to the next thing, right? That's the way we build success in our organization. So given that, where in fact do you get the white paper? We've got a website set up for it. It's ac3coalition.com. So that's the letter A, the letter C, the number 3, coalition.com. You can download the white paper there. We also are working on building what we hope is going to be a community of practice. One of the things that Shelly and I have been talking about throughout this entire conversation is the power that comes in associations working together. We want to provide a forum for that. So if you go to ac3coalition.com, you can download the white paper for free. As always, all the Spark Collaborative white papers are completely free. But if you'd like, you have the option of taking a short 3-question survey and giving us your contact information. If you are interested in being kept abreast of what is going to happen with this work of building a coalition, and a community of practice to actually work on this issue as an industry, give us your contact information so we can make sure we keep you involved in that conversation. And then finally, you can find me most easily at my website, getmespark.com.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's great. And I'm glad to hear more about the coalition. I saw posting in ASA Collaborate community about that. So I'm going to go check that out myself. Shelly, what is the thought you'd like the audience to take away today, and how can they get in touch?
The thought that I want to leave everybody with is we stand at a moment in human history that is challenging, to say the least. And we have the ability to look back to deep, ancient knowledge that we have, indigenous traditions, things that we can learn from. And we also have an uncertain future that has technological solutions that may be very, very important. We look at fusion energy, we look at new technologies that are sort of on the way. And we sort of need to bring that ancient wisdom and that forefront of the future together into this moment to create the meaning that we want to gift our planet with. And so, as association professionals, you helm organizations of great power, and it is safe for you to admit that you are concerned. We're creating a place of safety for people to say and not feel crazy. I'm really scared about this. It's like, it's okay. We're all really scared about this, and that's all right, because we're going to work together to do as much as we can to make our lives and the lives of our children and their children better. And so that's what I'd like to leave our audience with, and just thank everyone for being here.
Great. And how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to follow up with you directly?
ac3coalition.com is really where I'm spending most of my time. You can find out more about my work at shellyalcorn.com. But, other than that, you're going to see a lot of me on LinkedIn, I think, coming up here this year in 2024.
I look forward to it. Well, I want to thank you both. You are two of the strongest thinkers in our profession and some of the biggest brains. So thank you for all this work that you do. I love talking with you both. And Shelly, it's been great seeing you again. We were talking about how many years it's been since we actually saw each other, although we follow each other on social media. So, well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this week for this important conversation to kick off the year. If you're still looking for a New Year's resolution, maybe think about what you can do at your association to help make the climate future better for all of us. And if you're feeling really bad about things, go out and plant a tree. It'll make you feel good. So, and that's all we have for this week. We have to go rogue for now, but I want to thank Elizabeth and Shelly for joining me. So if you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help you bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com, and go to our services page to find out some of the different ways we can work together. If you're interested in CAE education, or you're just a curious sort like myself and want to take some different webinar topics, check out our education page, the 501c League.net. We are already posting our spring session courses. So thanks again for joining us. And on behalf of Elizabeth, Shelly, and myself, we'll see you next time.